What if the man you mocked as nothing, the gatekeeper who opened doors for you, was secretly the billionaire who owned everything you worshipped? This is not just a story of wealth and disguise. It is a story of betrayal, pride, love, and the ultimate question: when the mask falls, will love survive? The city lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across the night, yet to Ethan Cole they were nothing but reminders of a fortune that chained him. At 28 he had everything people dreamed of: skyscrapers in his name, fleets of cars, a tech empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires alive. But Ethan's penthouse was silent, and his heart was heavier than gold. He often stared at his late mother's picture, remembering her tired but wise eyes. Her words never left him: "Son, find someone who loves you, not your wealth." He had gained riches beyond measure, but he had lost what mattered most. He thought back to his teenage years, when he was humiliated by the father of his first crush. "My daughter will never marry a boy who can't even afford shoes." That wound drove him to fight poverty with fire, and he won. But in winning he discovered another prison. Every woman he met now wanted him for the same thing he hated: money. At a recent charity gala, Ethan overheard Mr. Adewale Johnson, the city's proudest real estate mogul, boasting, "No man without wealth is worthy of my daughters. My family marries power, not weakness." The words echoed like thunder. Ethan felt anger, but also inspiration. He poured a glass of scotch, staring at the skyline. What if wealth could be stripped away? What if love could be tested in the shadows? That night Ethan made his decision. He would disguise himself as a nobody. Not a businessman, not a tycoon, but a gatekeeper in the Johnson mansion. He smirked at the absurdity. The same hands that signed billion-dollar deals would open gates and carry brooms. The same man the world bowed to would bow to strangers driving past. But Ethan was ready. He picked up his phone and whispered, "Make it happen. Get me into Johnson's mansion as staff. No one must know." For the first time in years, his heart raced not from profit or power, but from risk. This was not a deal. This was a test. Somewhere behind those mansion gates, he hoped, was the answer to his mother's final question: can love survive without gold? And as the city slept, Ethan Cole, the billionaire the world envied, prepared to step into a disguise that would change everything. Mr. Adewale Johnson was a man who built his empire brick by brick, but also lie by lie. To the city he was the definition of success, a real estate mogul who owned half the skyline. But behind the polished smile, Johnson carried a past of betrayal, one he had buried deep under glass towers and luxury mansions. His household was just as grand, a sprawling estate with marble floors, imported chandeliers, and gates so high they seemed to keep out not just strangers, but humility itself. Yet within this mansion lived his 3 daughters, each shaped by wealth in very different ways. Tosin, the eldest, walked with her chin high and her eyes sharper than diamonds. To her, people were either assets or liabilities. She was beautiful, yes, but beauty hardened by pride. Suitors courted her endlessly, but she dismissed them all unless they came wrapped in wealth. Behind her charm was a desperation. Tosin had accumulated debts she kept hidden, but her arrogance kept her pretending she was untouchable. Lara, the second daughter, was cunning in another way. Where Tosin used pride, Lara used manipulation. She was the strategist, the daughter who could smile sweetly while plotting behind your back. Years ago she had fallen in love with Daniel, a young architect her father dismissed as too poor, too weak. Obedient to her father's command, Lara abandoned him, but the memory haunted her. She buried her regret under schemes, determined never to appear weak again. Amara, the youngest, was the outlier. Gentle, compassionate, and often dismissed by her sisters as too soft. She was the one who spoke kindly to the maids, who preferred a book in the garden to champagne in the ballroom. Her heart longed for love untainted by wealth, but in her father's mansion, such a dream was nearly forbidden. Amara carried her mother's quiet spirit, a spirit often mocked in a world obsessed with power. Mr. Johnson adored his daughters, but his love came with conditions. At dinner tables he often declared, "My daughters will only marry men of power. Wealth is the shield that protects this family." The daughters listened, but in their hearts they carried secrets. Tosin her debts, Lara her guilt, Amara her longing for a love beyond riches. One night, Johnson walked the halls of his mansion, pausing by the towering gates. His pride swelled. To him those gates symbolized everything: protection, power, prestige. Yet he had no idea that those same gates would soon be the entry point of the man destined to shake his empire to its core. And so, the Johnson mansion stood ready, a palace glittering on the outside but cracking quietly within. Ethan Cole was coming. But the Johnsons did not yet know that the gatekeeper they would scorn was a billionaire in disguise, a man carrying both love and vengeance in his heart. The Johnson mansion buzzed with routine that morning when a lean young man arrived at the towering gates with a small duffel bag in hand. His clothes were plain, his face shadowed by humility, but his eyes carried a depth few could ignore. "New gate man," the head of staff announced briskly, handing him the uniform. "Name?" "Ethan," he replied softly. But in his mind he whispered the truth, "Ethan Cole, billionaire." The uniform felt heavy on him, not because of the fabric but because of what it symbolized. Just the night before he had worn a tuxedo worth thousands. Now he buttoned a shirt that smelled of starch and sweat. He was no longer the master of towers, he was the keeper of gates. But that was exactly the disguise he needed. The first car rolled up, a sleek black Mercedes. Out stepped Tosin, dressed in designer heels. She looked Ethan up and down as though he were furniture. "Gate man," she said, tossing her keys casually. "Don't scratch it. Do you even know how to handle a car like this?" Her laughter was sharp, echoing like glass breaking. Ethan bowed slightly, hiding the fire in his eyes. Later that day Lara strolled out, her perfume filling the air. She paused by the gate, studying him longer than necessary. New face. "Don't get too comfortable," she warned, her tone both playful and poisonous. "This family doesn't tolerate mistakes." But it was Amara who noticed the sweat on his brow. She was walking with a basket of books in her arms when she paused. "You must be new," she said gently. "Have they given you water?" "It's too hot to stand here all day." Ethan blinked. No one had spoken to him that kindly since he arrived. "I'll be fine," he murmured, but her smile lingered, warm enough to cool the sun. From that moment, a quiet curiosity sparked between them. The staff, however, began whispering. "Strange, isn't it?" The youngest daughter talking to the gate man. Gossip spread like wildfire, sowing seeds of scandal before anything had even begun. That evening Ethan sat alone by the gate, staring at the mansion glowing under chandeliers. He had opened those gates dozens of times that day, but each clang of the metal reminded him of why he was here. "They see me as nothing," he thought, "but in truth, I hold more power than this entire mansion. Still, will she see me for who I am or just who I appear to be?" Inside the mansion, Tosin scoffed at Amara for her sympathy. Lara smirked, seeing an opportunity to mock. But Amara simply looked out the window at the lonely figure by the gate. She didn't know why she felt drawn to him, but she did. And Ethan didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The days passed, but Ethan didn't mind the routine of opening and closing gates. To him, every clang of the iron was a reminder of the disguise he wore, a disguise that stripped him of wealth but clothed him in truth. Amara often passed through those gates. At first, their exchanges were brief, a polite smile, a nod, a question about the weather. But soon their conversations grew longer, spilling into moments that neither of them had planned. One afternoon she stopped by with a book in hand. "Do you read?" she asked. Ethan looked at the title, Pride and Prejudice. He chuckled softly. "A little." She tilted her head. "Really? Most gatekeepers I've met don't have time for novels." Ethan's lips curved. "Most billionaires don't either," he thought silently, but aloud he said, "I make time when it matters." That line caught her attention. She sat on the low stone wall beside him, her dress brushing against the dust, something her sisters would never dare. "You speak differently," she said. "Like someone who's seen more than gates." He met her gaze, and for a brief second Ethan almost told her the truth. But he swallowed the words, choosing instead, "Maybe I've seen enough to know kindness is rare." Amara smiled, a quiet, genuine smile. In that moment Ethan felt more seen than he had in boardrooms full of investors. But not everyone was blind to their growing closeness. From her balcony Tosin watched with narrowed eyes. "Look at her," she hissed later to Lara. "Chatting with the gate man like they're equals. It's embarrassing." Lara smirked, always ready to twist the knife. Maybe she's desperate. Or maybe she's foolish enough to think love can exist without money. Their words were cruel, but they masked their own fears. Tosin feared her debts being exposed. Lara feared her past with Daniel resurfacing. And so, mocking Amara gave them a false sense of control. The staff joined the whispers. "The youngest daughter," they said, "is lowering herself." Gossip crept through the mansion like smoke, impossible to contain. That evening as Ethan closed the gates, Amara returned. She carried 2 cups of tea, one for him. "You've been standing all day," she said softly. "Drink." He accepted, their hands brushing. A spark passed between them, small but undeniable. Inside, Mr. Johnson was on a call, boasting again about power and wealth. He didn't know, not yet, that love was already blossoming just outside his gate, love that would challenge everything he believed. As the sun dipped, Ethan thought, she sees me as human. Not as a servant, not as a billionaire. Just me. But he also knew, when the truth surfaced, the very thing drawing her to him could be the thing that tore them apart. Behind the mansion's polished walls, not everything glittered as it seemed. Each member of the Johnson family carried secrets, fragile, heavy, and dangerous. Tosin, the eldest, was the most glamorous of the three daughters. She hosted soirees, posed for magazines, and wore diamonds like they were everyday jewelry. But beneath the sparkle was desperation. She was drowning in debt. Years of reckless spending, gambling trips abroad, and a failed business venture had left her owing money to ruthless loan sharks. She sat in her room one evening, her phone buzzing with threatening messages. One more week or else. Her hands shook as she hid the phone under her pillow, forcing a smile when her father passed by. She was terrified but too proud to ask for help. To everyone else she was untouchable. To herself she was one mistake away from ruin. Lara, the second daughter, sat in the garden with a glass of wine, staring at the fountain as memories drowned her. Years ago she had been in love with Daniel, a young architect with dreams but not money. She had believed in him, even promised him forever. But her father's harsh words still echoed. He will never give you the life you deserve. And she had. She broke Daniel's heart, choosing her father's approval over her own happiness. Daniel disappeared from her life, but not from her conscience. She wondered, often at night, if he had ever forgiven her. She feared the answer. So she buried her regret in manipulation, learning to control others so she would never again feel controlled. Mr. Johnson, meanwhile, carried the darkest secret of them all. His empire was built on betrayal. Decades ago he had partnered with his closest friend, a man named Cole, to start his first real estate venture. But greed overcame him. He forged papers, pushed his friend out of the business, and took everything. That betrayal had paved the way for his empire. Cole had died in poverty, leaving behind a widow and a young boy. Johnson told no one. He had buried the past with money and power, convincing himself the world had forgotten. But ghosts never stay buried. As Johnson paced his study one night, he glanced at the portrait of himself hanging on the wall. Power protects us, he whispered as though convincing himself. But deep inside he feared the day his sins would return. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her room, scribbling in her journal. Unlike her sisters, she didn't dream of wealth or parties. She dreamed of love, real love. She thought of Ethan, the quiet gatekeeper who spoke differently, who carried himself with humility and strength. She didn't know her sisters were already laughing about her attachment. She didn't know the staff were whispering. She only knew that when she spoke to Ethan she felt free. But in a mansion filled with secrets, freedom was an illusion. And soon, every hidden truth would come crashing to the surface. The mansion staff whispered more loudly with each passing day. At first, it was harmless chatter. A few comments about how the youngest daughter lingered too long at the gates. But whispers have wings, and soon the story twisted into something scandalous. The youngest Johnson girl is falling for the gate man, a maid murmured to the cook. By the end of the week it was spoken as fact. Amara is disgracing the family. The rumor slipped beyond the gates, reaching neighbors, friends, and eventually the press. A sly journalist spun it into a headline, "Billionaire's daughter linked to mansion worker." When the article reached Mr. Johnson's desk, his fury shook the house. He slammed the newspaper onto the dining table, his voice echoing like thunder. "Amara," he roared. "What is this nonsense I am reading? You were the gate man? A servant? Have you lost your mind?" Amara froze, her spoon clattering onto her plate. Tosin and Lara exchanged amused glances, pretending to hide their smirks. "Father, it's not what you think," Amara said, her voice calm but firm. "He is kind. He treats people with respect. Enough." Johnson cut her off. "Respect? Kindness? Those do not build empires. Power does. Wealth does. Do you want to disgrace this family to bring us shame?" "Shame?" Amara's eyes flashed. "Is it shameful to see a human being as human? He works hard, father. He deserves nothing." Johnson bellowed, slamming his fist against the table. "This family does not mix with people beneath us. You will end this foolishness immediately." Tosin leaned in, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Father is right, Amara. Love without money is just suffering. Do you really want that?" Lara added, "And think of the family's reputation. Do you want to be the headline of ridicule? Amara clenched her fists. I don't care about headlines. I don't care about status. I care about truth. Her sisters laughed, but their laughter was sharp, not soft. That evening, Amara slipped away to the gate. Ethan was there as always, the night air brushing against him. She told him what had happened. They think I'm a fool, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. Ethan's jaw tightened. Every word cut him because he could end her pain with a single revelation. I am not what they think. I am a billionaire richer than them all. But he couldn't. Not yet. The test wasn't finished. Instead, he said, sometimes the world mocks what it fears. They fear a love they cannot control. Amara looked at him, her heart swelling with something she couldn't yet name. But unseen by them both, two maids stood at a corner, watching. They hurried off to spread the story further, their whispers feeding the fire. The rebellion had begun, and the mansion was about to burn with scandal. The night was unusually quiet. The mansion slept, but Amara's heart would not. She slipped from her room, her steps soft against the marble, and wandered outside. At the gates, she found Ethan leaning against the iron bars, staring up at the sky as though it held secrets. You're awake too? She whispered. Ethan turned, surprised, then smiled faintly. Sleep doesn't always come easy. She stepped closer, the moonlight painting her face with silver. Do you ever feel, she began softly, like you're trapped? Surrounded by walls so high they keep the whole world out? Ethan's eyes darkened. She has no idea, he thought. She was speaking of the mansion, of her father's rules, of her sister's mockery. But to him the question carried deeper weight. His walls weren't just gates or guards. His walls were billions, boardrooms, and the fear of never being loved for himself. Yes, he said quietly. I know that feeling too well. Amara studied him. But you're just a gatekeeper. You could walk away anytime. Why stay? Her innocence pierced him. If only she knew. He wanted to tell her everything, that he wasn't trapped by poverty but by wealth, that he wasn't powerless but too powerful. But the truth would break the test, and so he answered carefully, sometimes even gatekeepers have reasons to stay, reasons they can't yet explain. For a moment, silence wrapped around them. Then Amara tilted her head back to the stars. I don't want to marry for money, she confessed. I don't want to live a life my sisters call success. I just want someone who sees me. Really sees me. Ethan's chest tightened. She's the one, he thought. The only one who speaks the truth my heart has been searching for. But just as hope filled him, fear followed. What if, when she learns who I am, she feels betrayed? What if she thinks I used her? Meanwhile, inside the mansion, storm clouds gathered. Tosin sat in her room, deleting messages from loan sharks threatening to expose her. She told herself she would handle it, but her eyes betrayed panic. Lara stared at an old letter from Daniel, the man she abandoned. She had kept it hidden for years, unable to burn it, unable to let go. She whispered his name into the dark. Mr. Johnson reread an old contract, the one he had forged to steal his partner's empire decades ago. A shadow crossed his face. He muttered, no one must ever know. Back at the gate, Amara turned to Ethan. Do you believe love can survive anything? Ethan met her gaze, the moon reflecting in her eyes. Yes, he whispered. But love must survive truth most of all. She smiled faintly, not realizing the storm of truth about to break over both their lives. And in that fragile silence, under a sky full of stars, Ethan felt closer to freedom than he ever had. But freedom never lasts without a price. The Johnson mansion had never gleamed brighter. Chandeliers sparkled, violins played, and guests in gowns and tuxedos filled the ballroom with laughter and clinking glasses. Tonight was Mr. Johnson's 60th birthday, a celebration of power, wealth, and legacy. Mr. Johnson stood tall at the head of the hall, his booming voice welcoming senators, CEOs, and socialites. Tonight, he declared, we honor not just my life but the empire I have built, the empire my daughters will inherit. Applause roared like thunder. Tosin basked in the spotlight, her gown dripping in diamonds she couldn't afford. Lara charmed businessmen with sly smiles, calculating favors. Amara lingered quietly near the edge, uncomfortable in the glittering crowd, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the gates outside. And then, the moment arrived. A sleek black Rolls-Royce glided to the entrance. Whispers rippled as the doors opened. Out stepped Ethan, not in uniform, not as a gatekeeper but as the billionaire he truly was. Tailored suit, polished shoes, confidence radiating like fire. The crowd gasped. Tosin's jaw dropped, Lara froze, and Amara's heart stopped. Who is he? Someone murmured. Another whispered, that's Ethan Cole. the tech billionaire. What's he doing here? He walked through the ballroom with calm precision, eyes fixed on Mr. Johnson. The staff who once mocked him bowed their heads, stunned. The daughters who once dismissed him stared, exposed. Mr. Johnson frowned. Who invited you? He demanded. Ethan smiled faintly. I invited myself. After all, I've been working at your gates for weeks. Surely that counts for something? Gasps erupted. The room turned to Amara, then back to Ethan. Tosin stammered, Wait, you mean, all this time? Yes, Ethan said, his voice steady. I was the gate man you mocked, the servant you dismissed, the man you thought beneath you. His eyes swept the room. But I am also Ethan Cole, billionaire, investor, and owner of half the towers the city admires. The room exploded with murmurs. Tosin rushed forward, her voice sugary sweet. Ethan, forgive me. I didn't know. If I had, I would have. You would have pretended kindness, Ethan cut her off. The same way you pretend you are not drowning in debt. The crowd gasped again. Tosin's face drained of color. Lara stepped forward, trying to smile. We were only teasing, Ethan. Surely you understand. You mean the way you abandoned Daniel when your father told you to choose wealth over love? Ethan's words sliced through the air. Lara froze, her smile collapsing. The ballroom was no longer a celebration. It was a courtroom. Ethan the judge. The Johnsons the accused. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but not of shame, of relief. She had loved him when he was nothing. And now he stood before her as everything. Mr. Johnson's face burned crimson. How dare you humiliate my family in my house? Ethan met his gaze. I am not here to humiliate. I am here to reveal truth. The masks you wear have cracked. Tonight, the world sees who you truly are. The music had stopped. The empire was shaking. And the banquet, meant to honor power, had become its greatest undoing. The ballroom was in chaos. Guests whispered, phones buzzed, and the Johnson name, once untouchable, trembled under Ethan's words. But the night was not finished. The storm had only begun. The doors burst open, and in walked a man with tired eyes but steady steps. His presence silenced the room. Lara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel, she whispered. He was older, hardened, but unmistakably the man she once loved. The man she abandoned at her father's command. I wasn't planning to come, Daniel said, his voice carrying across the hall. But when the news broke of Amara and a gatekeeper, I thought, perhaps it was time the world heard the truth about this family. Mr. Johnson stiffened. You have no place here. Daniel's eyes narrowed. No place? You stole my place decades ago. He turned to the stunned crowd. Yes, Adewale Johnson, the so-called empire builder, was once my partner. We built this company together. But he forged documents, betrayed me, and left me in ruins while he rose to power. Gasps cut through the hall like knives. All eyes swung back to Mr. Johnson. Lies. Johnson thundered. This is slander. Ethan stepped forward, calm but commanding. Not lies. Proof. He lifted a folder from his briefcase, tossing it onto the table. Contracts, bank records, letters, evidence Johnson thought buried. I bought the silence of the men you paid to hide your sins. Tonight, the silence ends. The guests surged with murmurs, snapping photos, recording videos. The empire Johnson built was collapsing in real time. Tosin stumbled forward, her voice trembling. Father, say something. Tell them it isn't true. But before Johnson could speak, another voice rang out. And what of your daughter's debts? A creditor from the crowd stepped forward, emboldened by the chaos. Tosin owes millions. She gambled in private clubs under your name. If not for your reputation, we'd have dragged her to court already. Tosin froze, her facade shattered. Her diamonds seemed to mock her, glittering against her pale face. Lara turned desperately to Daniel. I'm sorry. I never wanted to leave you. Daniel's voice broke. You chose wealth over love. And look where it has brought you, a gilded cage now crumbling to dust. The ballroom felt like Judgment Day. Mr. Johnson, once the king of the city, now stood cornered, exposed, broken. His daughters, one humiliated by debt, one haunted by regret, one quietly vindicated. And then Ethan spoke the words that sealed it all. Power without integrity collapses. Wealth without love destroys. You, Adewale Johnson, built an empire of sand. And tonight, the tide has washed it away. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating. Mr. Johnson's eyes darted around the room, desperate for an ally, but finding none. Even the men who once praised him now recoiled, unwilling to be tainted by his fall. Amara stood still, her heart pounding. She had defended love against ridicule, and now love stood victorious. Yet she felt no triumph, only sorrow for the ruins around her. And deep inside, one thought flickered: what will remain when the dust settles? The ballroom was wreckage. Mr. Johnson stood humiliated, Tosin broken, Lara exposed, Amara vindicated. Guests whispered eagerly, phones flashing, hungry for the downfall of giants. Ethan turned to leave, Amara by his side, when Mr. Johnson's bitter laugh cut through the air. "You think you've won, Ethan Cole?" His voice was hoarse, but his eyes gleamed with something dark. "You know nothing of me. Nothing of her." The crowd hushed. Amara stiffened. Johnson pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. "You parade yourself as savior, but the truth will gut you. That girl you cling to, Amara, she is not who you think." Amara's blood ran cold. "Father, stop." But Johnson roared on. "You believe she is my daughter, the pure one, untouched by my greed? No. She is not mine by blood. Her mother came to me already carrying another man's child. I raised her as a Johnson, but she is no Johnson. She has no share in my empire." The crowd erupted in shock. Amara staggered, her breath stolen. "Lies?" she whispered, though doubt pierced her chest. Ethan's face hardened. "You would rather destroy your own daughter than face your crimes?" Johnson sneered. "She is not mine. And if you want truth, Ethan, you'd better know whose blood she really carries. Her real father was Daniel." A collective gasp tore through the hall. Daniel stepped forward, stunned. "What?" "Yes." Johnson spat, his voice trembling with rage and triumph. "The man you defend, the man who returned tonight, Amara is his blood, not mine. I stole his empire, but I raised his child. And now the irony: the billionaire who came to test my family has fallen in love with the daughter of the man I betrayed." Amara's knees weakened, tears spilling. "Is it true?" she whispered to Daniel. Daniel's face softened with grief. "Your mother, before Johnson took everything, we were together. I didn't know. I never knew she carried you." His voice cracked. "Amara, you are my daughter." The room spun. Guests gasped, reporters scribbled, cameras flashed. Ethan froze. Every test, every choice, every word of love now twisted into something deeper. He had not only exposed a corrupt family, he had fallen into the center of a generational war. Amara clutched her chest. "Then who am I, Ethan? A Johnson? A Daniel? Or no one at all?" Ethan stepped forward, taking her hands firmly. His voice was steady, strong. "You are not defined by either man. Not by Johnson's greed. Not by Daniel's loss. You are Amara, the woman who loved without conditions, who saw truth when others hid behind lies." Silence fell again. For the first time that night, Amara stood tall, no longer in her father's shadow, no longer her sister's victim. She was her own. Ethan turned to the crowd. "This is not the end of an empire. This is the birth of something new, built on love, not lies." The hall erupted, half in awe, half in shock. Some cheered, others whispered. But no one would forget. And as Ethan and Amara walked out together, leaving Johnson to crumble and Daniel to weep with bittersweet revelation, the question burned in every mind: was this victory, or the beginning of an even greater war?